Okay, so I've got a question, and then we can go to the people's questions. So
You always have interesting questions.
yeah. So at my property, there's 2 walls, but the one wall has a what do you call it? A pipe steel.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it in English, but you know what I'm talking
Warren
about.
will help us out.
Yes,
out
Warren, please. Gooi ons die Engels daarso. So I have that on the one side. So there's no house directly bordering my house. On the other side, I have a house bordering on my side, but the other side of their house is again an open road post. So they don't have somebody bordering on that side. So there's 2 houses, one bordering on nothing, other one bordering on nothing, and then the one shared wall in the middle. Who is responsible for that wall? Because what's now happened is that wall has collapsed, or part of that wall has collapsed because of roots and things like that. So how do we calculate who's responsible? I have my own thoughts. Obviously, I'm not responsible. I'm from South Africa. There's no responsibility on me. But you can tell me.
Lawrence, that's always a very, very difficult question to answer. Remember, again, retaining walls and boundary walls form part of building insurance. So let's get that out of the way first. There is a type of insurance cover for it. But who should claim from the insurance? The obvious answer would be the person who built the wall. Now, that always results in an argument because the wall was built 20 years ago, before any one of you actually stayed in the house. And that is especially difficult with a brick type wall because it's got no inside or outside.
Yeah, this one does have an inside and an outside. So that was my argument. But in any case, yeah, continue.
The old precast walls, usually the person whose house is facing the slabs, that's the person whose wall it is. But to answer your question would be, it's easier to get an assessor out, claim from your insurance, have them get an assessor out, and let him or her determine whose wall it is.
Yeah.
And
they will give you a recommendation. And if they come out and say, listen, we've looked at it, it is not your wall, it is the other person's wall, it's not going to cost you anything, or it's not going to have an effect on your no claim bonus or anything.
Because you're not physically claiming.
Yeah.
And what we also have to remember, especially with boundary walls, it's in both parties' interest to get the wall fixed.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have access to your neighbor's house, and they definitely don't want access to yours, especially when there are pets involved and stuff like that.
Yeah. The problem here is, so the first one is that the boundary wall is a precast, and the nice side is facing them, so it's their wall. I had to look at the bad side, so technically it's their wall. But they've put palisades on the inside of that wall. So that argument is now, but we've got palisades. So the wall is not our problem, which is going to become an argument, I feel.
You see, again, it now gets down to technicalities, because you can then go and remove that wall completely.
Yeah, and look at their...
And they have palisades.
And their kitchen.
But then you are trespassing on their property, because the property line would potentially be the boundary wall. So get an assessor out, have a professional opinion about it, and then get it fixed.
I think that's very good advice. So get the assessor and let them give you an opinion, and then get it on paper.
Yeah.
Because then when you do talk to the neighbor, you can say, well, we got our assessor out. This is the report. It says it's your responsibility. Please get your assessor out as well. Let them come with a report. If they say we are responsible, then the assessors have to fight with each other and then decide who's going to fix the damn wall. The damn wall.
No, it's a boundary wall.
Okay. All right. So Gert asks, is it necessary for a home inspection before getting home insurance?
Is it necessary? No. Is it recommended? Yes. The reason I say this is because of the potential risk of underinsurance. When we discussed household contents and also the general insurance principles, we discussed the principle of Avery or underinsurance. So the same applies to your household contents. It would be better to get somebody out to assist you in determining the value of your household contents. It would be better to get a builder out and have them help you determine the value of your building.
Yes.
Again, the rebuilding value. To make certain that you are correctly insured.
Yeah, because the builder will also be able to look at your fixtures and fittings and
give you a
look at
better
what
idea.
the cost is going to be
Yes.
to replace that. Okay, so it is highly recommended. It's not compulsory, but it is highly recommended. Gert, I hope that answers your question. Fricky says, we at the office had an outside office with a corrugated iron roof and it started leaking. The insurance did not want to pay out due to us not keeping up the maintenance on the roof. But how do and who does constantly look on the roof and keep up the maintenance? Is there a clause that says how many times a year you must look at the condition of the roof? So there's two things there that I just want to, I think the first one is it is still the owner's responsibility to keep up the maintenance of the property. Whether there's a specific guideline, and that's where the grey areas come in. What is reasonable? But yeah, give us your opinion on that.
That's very true what you're saying, Lawrence. I think what applies is the reasonable man test. When insurance companies look at maintenance, they apply the principle of duty of care. You must maintain your property, your contents, your car, whatever the case might be, to the best of your ability as the reasonable man would. So there's no specific guidelines, there's no clause saying you have to get on your roof once a week to go and look at how it looks and whether it's leaking or not. But especially with metal roofs, there needs to be a duty by yourself to go and maintain it, plug any leaks. Metal roofs don't last that long.
Yeah.
So they need to be replaced.
Painted.
Clean the gutters. Guys, there's so many times we have claims for water damage which repudiated by the insurance company because of dirty gutters.
Yeah.
And that's something you can maintain yourself. Get up there, clean your gutters once a month, once every 3 months, just before summer, and make certain that there's adequate space for water flow. Make certain the roof is not leaking. I think the most important thing to remember here is we're not referring to something that is happening all of a sudden. There's a tornado, a massive flood, and your roof blows away. We're referring to what they call gradual causes. So it happens so many times that people claim for water damage to a ceiling that's been dripping on, or that the water has been dripping on for the past 5 years.
Yeah, so they can see that mark is like brown and old.
The insurance company is not going to pay for that because that is a maintenance issue. That's a duty of care issue.
Yes. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Fricky. Let's look at the next question. Helene says, hi there. I have learned that through experience you need to specify outbuildings like the swimming pool, the lapa, etc. and make sure it's a reasonable amount. Lots of amounts adding up and can be underinsured.
There's no facility for you to, under the building insurance, specify certain buildings.
The different buildings.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You're insuring the property as a whole. That said and done, there's a couple of clauses under the building insurance that we need to be cognizant about, especially things like swimming pool and borehole pumps. If you do have a swimming pool, if you do have a borehole, there's a facility for you to not really specify it, but mention that that is included. The reason you would want to have them know this more specifically is because then it qualifies for accidental damage, which would cover things like power surge and so on and so forth, which is not covered under your normal building insurance.
I think that the big thing there is make sure that the value you're insured for includes the rebuilding of these things as well. Even a swimming pool. I have to rebuild that swimming pool.
That's very true. And on the subject of LAPAs, if you do have a LAPA, it increases the fire risk in your house.
Especially if it's connected to the house.
Yeah, they usually have a clause which states if it's within 5 or 10 meters of the house, the premium is going to be more expensive. So be sure to mention this to the insurance company. Don't just say, oh no, I'm just insuring my building.
Yes.
Make certain you specify these things, not specify them, mention them specifically, so that the correct premium can be charged. Otherwise, the insurance company will repudiate your claim again.
Yeah, and a good insurance advisor, even the direct guys, they should be asking these kind of questions as part of their underwriting process. So it is important. But again, the onus is on you to be correctly insured. You can't not do it and then afterwards say, oh, but the insurance company never asked me. Guys, if we have to ask, or the insurance advisor have to ask every possible question for every possible permutation that might happen, you're going to sit with them on the phone when underwriting for 4.5 hours, and
Correct.
Nobody's going to do that. So it is important for you to read through your document to understand what is covered and make sure that everything is covered under your policy. All right. Any specific things that you want to talk about? I don't want to not get to everything before we get into more questions, because there's quite a few more questions.
Lawrence, no, building insurance is actually one of the easier parts to understand. There's not a lot of different variations as we spoke about with all risk or household contents. So let's continue on with the questions.
Okay, so we've got a question from Ruan. He says, how does homeowners insurance work in a complex if I own a unit inside of the complex? What should the body corporate cover and what do I cover?
When we're looking at complexes or sectional titles, what usually happens is that the body corporate insures the complex as a whole. The main reason for this is because of the properties being attached to each other, the buildings. If we're talking about freestanding properties, then you would insure it yourself. So if you're staying in a complex where every house is separate from the other one, yes, you would be.
Also, sorry, I'm interrupting. Sorry, Yobi. But it's about, is it a sectional title or is it a full title?
Correct.
Yeah. So if it's sectional title, the responsibility is with the body corporate to have it insured.
The responsibility, yes, but the responsibility is also on your side to make certain what is insured. So because of the fact that what happens to one unit, especially a fire, flood, would automatically affect the next unit or the unit attached to it, the body corporate usually insures the complex as a whole.
Okay.
So the responsibility on the owner's side would be to make certain, number one, what is insured, and number two, that the premiums are actually being paid.
Yes. Yeah, so that is why if you are on a sectional title scheme, get involved with your body corporate. I'm not saying go and sit in the body corporate and make that stress part of your life. But if they've got a meeting, go sit in the meeting. Ask for a copy of the schedule to actually see, because at the end of the day, it is still your property. It's still your asset that you need to make sure it is insured.
You are going to be the person suffering the financial loss. And we see this so many times, and that's why I'm so glad about the questions. We sit with so many people and they kind of are afraid to ask questions. They're afraid to sound stupid. Guys, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
Ask the questions, get the answers.
Now, the only stupid questions is the unasked one. That's a stupid question because you've just never asked it. Okay, so the next question is homeowners insurance tax deductible? That is from Helene.
No. As a general rule, it would not be tax deductible. Remember, guys, anytime something is tax deductible, that would mean that when there's a payout, it needs to be taxed. Unfortunately, that's how tax law works in South Africa. So no, it would not be tax deductible.
There is exceptions to that though. So if you are renting out a property, so you're generating an income from that property, then you can claim that back as expenses on the income that is earned from that property. So in that sense, then it will be tax deductible, but that's 90% of people don't, which means that you can't claim your homeowner's insurance from tax if you're an employee and you're living in your house. That's not a tax deductible expense.
Correct.
Okay, the next question. Lillian asks, what's an umbrella policy and why would you need that? Okay, so I'm thinking, I see Yabi's face like, umbrella policy. Are we talking about the Umbrella Academy here? So what I'm thinking of is umbrella, meaning like a group scheme umbrella.
Correct.
Group scheme, yeah. So that's not got anything
umbrella
to do
type
with
of insurance would be how your sectional title or the corporate type of insurance works. So It's more of a commercial type of insurance, which covers a group of properties on the same stand or on the same scheme. When it gets to personal insurance, there's no umbrella type of insurance, unless you're referring to the company that has a little umbrella.
A yellow umbrella, Elian, I hope that answers your question. If you need more information on that question, you can ask it and just specify a little bit more of the background on why you're asking that. Maybe we'll understand a little bit better. Mpo asks, should I inform my insurer when I make use of gas, such as a gas stove, a geyser, etc.? Does that impact my policy at all?
It does, definitely. And it ties in with what you mentioned earlier, Lawrence. If you wait for an insurer to ask all the questions, the underwriting process is going to take you half a day. So the more information you give an insurance company or your financial advisor, the better informed decision they can make. So definitely, if you make use of a gas stove, a gas geyser, whatever the case might be, inform the insurance company, because it does increase the risk.
Will gas necessarily increase the risk?
It won't necessarily affect the premium, but I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah, so I agree 100% with you. Get your proper installation certificate. Make sure that it is on record with the insurance company. Inform them the type of gas that you use. Is it a geyser? Is it a stove? What kind of gas is it? And make sure that they know, so that if there's ever a claim, you don't have to do all of that work then, because it then just makes it faster for you to pay out the claim. So the impact on the policy, it might have an impact. It depends on how the installation looks and what kind of gas, what you're using it for, but it doesn't necessarily increase the premium. I think with mine, I've got a gas installation for my stove. I don't think that's increased my premium at all.
No.
All right, Mpo, I hope that answers your question. But yes, inform your insurer. It's always better, guys, to rather give the insurer too much detail instead of too little detail. It just makes it easier up front, if you give it up front, to have your claims paid out at the end, because then they have it on record.
That's so true, Lawrence. Remember, when doing underwriting, especially with short-term insurance, it's usually a telephonic thing that happens. Even if you speak to your financial advisor, the insurance company would phone you up and confirm certain details. That call is recorded and forms part of the insurance contract. So any information you give then forms part of what they are going to use to either pay or not pay a claim.
Yes.
If you mention items like, for instance, a LAPA, a gas installation, there's no way they can come back and say, no, you never told us about this.
Yeah, and now the risk is higher. We got a question from Tombi that says, does home insurance cover natural disasters? And if they do, what is the limit to it? Yeah, you've opened up a whole can of worms. So, Tombi, this is a very, very interesting question. So, Yapi, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Tombi, thanks very, very much for the question. And like Lawrence pointed out, this is a question that we can either cover the basics, or we can have half an hour discussion concerning it. The short answer would be, is natural disasters covered? Yes, it is. To what limit? The limit would be the insured value of the property. So there's no sub-limit saying that, because of a tornado or because of a flood, you're only covered for X percentage. But what makes this question very, very interesting is the whole concept of a state of disaster. So when we are looking at an area that's affected by a natural disaster, so a town, a province, whatever the case might be, the insurance companies generally push the government to kind of declare a state of disaster. Why would they do this? Because now, all of a sudden, the onus is on the government to fix it. The government, because they accept responsibility in the state of disaster wording of the legislation, is then obliged to pay out or fix the properties of the people.
And the government will have insurance in their own capacity.
Correct.
They should have insurance in their own capacity.
They should have, yes.
And although we stay in South Africa, riots is not a natural disaster.
No.
it's so natural that we're so used to it. We can call it a natural disaster, but it's not.
That's totally correct. That's something completely different. But guys, what we have to remember is that in general, your insurance policy, like I mentioned, covers natural disasters. When a state of emergency or a state of disaster is declared, you are going to wait months, sometimes even years, for the government to actually pay you out. And they will not necessarily compensate you to replacement or rebuilding value.
Yes.
They will say, we have allocated 10 million rand for cover in this whole area, and whomever is affected gets a share of that. So it's very important to make certain, if you're staying in areas that are prone to natural disasters, make certain the building is correctly insured. Make certain your contents, all of these items are correctly insured.
Just quickly, I don't know if you know this, is it a question of, let's say for example, you live in an area like the Laarveld, Mpumalanga, and there is this massive flood and your house and the whole area is flooded. Will insurance companies pay those claims first and they claim back from the government when a state of disaster is declared? Or does the insurance company then just throw up their hands and say, sorry, not our responsibility, you have to sort out your own thing?
It depends very much on the insurance company. Some of the bigger insurance companies would generally pay the claims out and then claim back from the government. Again, we discussed the whole concept of subrogation, where the insurance company basically takes over your rights towards a claim or towards an item. Some of the smaller insurance companies would just abandon you and say, sorry.
Yeah, we can't pay all of these claims, because that's why this whole state of disaster is there, because governments walk in to take over that responsibility because they know insurance companies and the financial sector will basically collapse if all of them have to cover those claims.
That is correct.
No. So they insure for when the insurers they insure the insurance companies basically. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Tombi. So yes, in a normal scenario, it will be covered. If a tornado comes and takes your whole house, then the insurance will pay out and the house will be replaced or rebuilt. Okay. We've got a question from Sean van der Berg. He says, will my insurance cover when someone drives through my boundary wall? And do I still need to pay the excess on it?
There's a couple of questions attached to that seemingly innocent question. So, first off, will your insurance cover it? Yes, they will cover it because it's damage to your property. Will you still need to pay the excess? Yes. Unfortunately, excesses are always payable in the event of a claim as applicable. But the reason it's a more interesting question is because of the liability aspect to it. Again, referring to the clause of subrogation, what your insurance company would do is fix or replace your boundary wall or repair it as they see fit, and then claim the damages from the person who actually drove through your boundary wall.
Or his insurance then.
Or his insurance company. So, in that event, the excess is still payable. What usually happens in this situation, and we'll get into more detail when we're discussing vehicle insurance because it's a bit more practical over there, is that you would be responsible for the excess if there is an excess on your building, and once the money is recovered or the damage is recovered from the third party, the insurance company will pay your excess back. Please understand this sometimes takes years.
Yeah,
to get
because
done.
again, it depends on how clear cut it is and how quickly the other guy's insurance company. But a lot of times, especially if it's small damage, it's usually not a major issue. But if it's big damage, it can be court cases for a long time. So technically, when they do claim back, the insurance company is reimbursed. They will then reimburse you your excess. Do they also then give you back your no claim bonus? Does it go back to, let's say it was a 5, it goes back to a 5 again?
They do. If your policy wording makes use of a no claim bonus, yes, they would reinstate your no claim bonus, so the premium would be adjusted accordingly. Interesting fact is, if you make use of a cashback or get some rewards, that is now lost.
Gone. Yeah, whether they claim back or not, they're not going to give your cash back to you.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so just keep that in mind. So that's our discussion for today on homeowners insurance. Guys, thank you so much for listening.